All right, so let's take it out of here, right? So this is the case it comes with. This is the 512 gigabyte version case, and we can talk a little bit more about it later, but there are different cases. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But ta-da! Here is the Steam Deck, and I've got it on already. And you can see it's kind of a chunker. It's not small. I don't think they were going for small. They were going for, as cool as you can get. It's about 11.73 inches wide, which is significantly deeper than the Switch, which is, I think, about 9.4 inches wide. And I think this is about 1.5 pounds, give or take. So, but it's never felt too light. In fact, the feel of this thing is great. It feels really good in the hands. I mean, it's made of plastic, but it feels really nice. You have these triggers and buttons that all feel really good. The buttons were initially mushier than like the really clicky ones you find on an Xbox controller, for instance, but I really grew to enjoy them. There's not a lot of impact. You can go and mash them real hard. And then you have these joysticks, which I think are some of the best joysticks I've ever used. I know a lot of people worry about things like drift. I think most controllers drift eventually. You really can't help that, but these ones feel... Oh, did I go to launch a game? I think I went to launch a game. These games feel... Thank you, touchscreen. These games feel... These feel super solid. And there is a way to replace them that's been detailed in a video, but I think these feel like something that can last a while. You have these touch pads underneath them. At first, I kind of thought they were gimmicky. They remind you of the Steam controller, right? Which was really focused on touch. But it ends up that as purely as a mouse replacement, it works really well. So I found that when I play games like, for instance, like Civ 6, which I found is just like a great game to show off the deck for me, because it uses almost all the features, I would use this as a mouse. And it works really well in there. It works really good as a mouse in Linux. And then if you're playing a first-person shooter title, you could use touch instead of this control stick if you wanted, and that makes for slightly more sensitive gestures. Other than that, you have these two menu buttons, Steam, which is your main menu here, which brings up all of these little subcategories, which we can go through a little bit later. Then you have your quick settings, which is actually equally important, which brings up lots of little things you can toggle, like your brightness and audio, and do you want rumble, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, what is your battery percentage, and then do you want to make like all these little tweaks, like limiting your frame rate to save battery. So there's a lot going on, but it feels like a really premium piece of hardware for a first go. The really only like seams you see are these ones around the sides, which are just so it could be opened if you needed to. Port-wise, it's not a ton with the ports. This is the big one. It's USB-C on the top. And then on the bottom, there's a micro SD card slot, which I think is going to be really important for a lot of people, especially if you bought the base 64 gigabyte model or even the 256. But it's a really easy way to expand storage. I mean, obviously, you'll have to pay more for an SD card, but I found that performance off the SD card, at least a really good one, if you invest in a good one, is actually almost just as good as being on the SSD itself. So like out of the box, I just got this really good vibe from it. I also really like, this is the 512 gigabyte model, which I mentioned specifically because it has the etched anti-glare screen. As you may see from the video, like there is reflection. If you're watching it, you can see the lights in my face coming off the top, but when you're holding it in position, like in front of you, like this, it actually looks quite good. There's not a lot of lights bouncing off. And I think it really looks lovely. Valve quotes 400 nits. I could believe that. We haven't run it over a colorimeter or anything, but frankly, I've been running it a little dimmer to get more battery life. So, otherwise, you have these two speakers, which I think they sound quite good for gaming. Not as good for music, but they work. And then otherwise, the last thing I forgot to mention, back buttons. Usually you see these on Pro controllers, but Valve has them built in already. Some games are already ready to use them, other ones aren't, but you can go in through Steam Deck and you can customize the controls so that you're ready to assign whichever buttons you want on the front to the back. So if you're playing in a more competitive way, then you could use those. And the last thing I might notice, or I might recommend for some people, is I used some dongles. And you'd be like, well, why do you want a dongle? I tried these two specifically, and that's because the USB-C port is it's limited. And obviously there are things you connect via Bluetooth. I tried these headphones I have in, I tried the Xbox controller, but you could use something like a dongle to connect over HDMI to a monitor, for instance. Or if you want to use a different form of storage, maybe when you're on the Linux desktop, that's a great way to do it. Or if you want to connect a keyboard and mouse, this is going to be the way to do it. I like using this one because it has USB power, which means I could take the adapter that came with it and plug it in. But if you don't have that, you could still connect something else and just run off the battery. So I think that's a quick run around of the system.